Hey everyone, welcome back to the Logistics and Leadership Podcast. Brian here. This next conversation was originally from another podcast called the Logistics of Logistics Podcast that I was a guest on. So thank you to Joe Lynch and his team. I wanted to share this with you because it's packed with insights on food safety and cold chain operations. If you move anything perishable, this is a must listen. Here's that discussion.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is From Farm to Fork, a broker's guide to food safety and cold chain logistics with my friend Brian Hastings. How's it going, Brian?
Doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me on the show today.
I'm excited to talk to you. So, Brian, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, so my name is Brian Hastings. I'm CEO, co-founder of Veritas Logistics. We're a third-party logistics company based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we've been around since June of 2020. So we're
Very nice.
Yeah, we're a smaller brokerage, based in Cincinnati. We have close to 25 people, and we focus on the food and beverage industry and that sector.
I like it. So, I like the name Veritas. It means what?
It's Latin for truth. Obviously, in our industry, if you've been around for a while, that is a backbone to any type of relationship and any type of partnership.
Yeah, it's not always easy to tell the truth in this business. But I think this business kind of runs on white lies, which is, I'll be there in an hour. Yeah, the truck's on its way. Little less so now with visibility the way it is. And I would also say, I used to joke that people who work for me, when in doubt, just go ahead and tell the truth.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier.
It's always the best policy, man. I feel like our
It is.
moms always, told us something valuable. So
I think also truth means picking up the phone rather than I send a text, because I always feel like that's the cheating way. It's like, I sent an email, I sent a text. I don't want them to be mad at me.
Joe, don't get me started. I feel like you're are you purposely trying to ask that question? Don't get me started there.
Yeah. So what kind of business do you guys specialize in?
Yeah, so we specialize in food and beverage. I would say about 80% of our current company is focused in hauling that type of product. It's where, we grew up. It's where we have the most experience. And it's also where we feel like we can bring the most value to those shippers and manufacturers out there.
Yeah, Brian, I told you this the other day when we met, that I love people who specialize. And I think the market is kind of demanding that of companies now.
Sure.
And when you talk about, which we're going to talk about food and food safety and cold chain, the bar is higher. And we are talking now on July 17th. It is hot in the Midwest and it's on fire down south. So you need this time of year, as we're starting harvests pretty soon. That stuff's got to stay cold. We all expect to eat cold, safe food when it gets to us in August, September, and the rest of the year.
That's right. Yeah, cold chain is extremely important. I mean, I would say, during the summertime, the statistics are crazy as far as how much produce and fresh fruit and vegetables that we in the U.S. that we eat that are from California, and transporting that across the country. The cold chain initiative is a real thing, and that's something that people have to pay attention to, especially when we're talking about farm to fork. How do we get this product from A to B and keeping the right type of temperature throughout transit?
You also have a podcast. Talk about your podcast.
Yeah, so we have a podcast called Logistics and Leadership. It's focused on our industry, focused on best practices. We just recently shifted focus where we are bringing individuals on to the show to tell their story, to have conversations about the industry, to make it better as a whole. I think there's a lot of gray area and there's a lot of folks out there that are not as knowledgeable. And that's what we want to do. We want to take our, 15 plus years of experience and, bring that to the market and, help anybody else out there to raise the bar within the brokerage space or within the trucking space.
Yeah, it's important. And I always say the podcast is the best way to educate us. So many people say to me, when somebody's new at our company, we tell them, listen to the Logistics of Logistics to learn about the business. And That's always been my goal is I think I've always had thought of it as two ways. I want to have thought leaders like yourself share their expertise. And then I want, obviously, the listeners to be able to gain that access to those thought leaders. And I think that is what podcasting is so great at. And, there's a million people who are thought leaders who are too busy working every day to get out and get
Mhm.
on the stages at all the conferences.
Yeah.
Podcast has given us a way to kind of widen the thought leadership arena.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, 2025, I think we have, podcasting is a platform to do that, to let your voice be heard and share your experience. And I think that's where, we live in the time now where we're getting so much information and we have as much information as we need at our fingertips. So, yeah, I think that, that's one of the reasons why we started it is to share that information. But yeah, we've heard a lot of great reviews, especially from other brokerages, other shippers, other carriers, that sort of thing.
So I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, link to your podcast. Any other links you give me, I'll put in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you. So Brian, tell us about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you started Veritas, and why did you start Veritas?
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up in a small town north of Kansas City, Missouri, a town called Kearney, Missouri. Population, 5,000 at the time. I think they've grown since then. My parents were divorced. My dad lived on the East Coast, was raised by a single mom at that point, and she was a stinking grinder where
Mhm.
she worked several jobs, put food on the table. There was a time where, I didn't have, or I had, some humble beginnings, right? Where we didn't have enough, income to make ends meet. And, so I think that helped me be the resilient person that I am today. And it helped me shape, kind of my mindset and my perspective of a lot of things. So grew up just like any other kid in the Midwest. I, love sports. Followed every kind of sport imaginable. Grew up, I kind of honed in on baseball. So I played baseball pretty much all the way throughout college. I ended up going to school at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. I met my,
Nice.
yeah, yeah. So, big time Cats fan. And, so I met my wife there. We kind of settled in Cincinnati after the fact, which is about an hour and a half north of Lexington. And I've, started my first job in 2009 at TQL, entry level sales rep, kind of smiling and dialing, doing the grunt work. And, that was, looking back at it, man, it was, I didn't know anything about logistics jumping in, but I'm so grateful for that opportunity and, getting in this industry that I love. Um,
That's
within
great.
that time, I helped, go out and grow a couple different offices. We opened up an office in Lexington, Kentucky at the time. It was kind of during their big expansion push. So we opened up an office in Lexington. I then went and opened up an office in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And then I came back here to Cincinnati. And at that point, I kind of got to that mid-level manager role.
Good.
And, for me, I kind of saw the writing on the wall and I was going to have to be there for quite a while. And I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to, sit in that role for a while. And so at that point, I quit. I sat out my non-compete. And then, we started the company in June of 2020. And that was, it was a tricky time. It was,
I was right in the middle of COVID, right?
I think, the official start of COVID was what, March of 2020 when the world shut down. So yeah, it was a tricky time. We had numerous educated people that said, "Hey, are you sure you want to start it at this time?" And I know for me, it was a point where, hey, listen, I've sat out my non-compete and it was grueling and we're starting. I don't care. I don't care how long we go that we don't make a dollar.
Yep.
We're going to start this thing. So yeah, that's where, we've learned a lot along the way. And I think it's, starting at that time helps you be resilient and helps you be resourceful because we didn't
Yep.
have any money starting out. And that was one thing that I'm very proud of is, it wasn't a trust fund. It wasn't a, private investor funding. It wasn't venture capital funding or anything like that. So we've been able to grow it, within Cincinnati. We have hired a handful of people that are remote employees as well. And so here we sit today. We're 5 years later. We, just did, I think last year we were at like $44 million in gross sales
That's
and
fantastic.
moved over 15,000 loads. So, our focus is always about our people. How do we create the best workplace possible? And how do we always focus on the development of our people, as well as servicing our clients best possible way? So, we want to have a high focus on those things and making sure that we are the best business partners, not for today or tomorrow, but for the long term.
Today, we're going to talk about this topic from farm to fork, and we're really going to dive into food safety and cold chain logistics, something near and dear to me. The reason I say that is I did a whole bunch of training on the Food Safety Modernization Act when it came out years ago,
Hmm.
and it's obviously sanitary transportation is critically important, and we all are, for the most part, I think our industry has adopted that. But I think the bar is much higher when we talk about food uh, and food safety and the cold chain and keeping those temperature controlled vehicles, temperature controlled. And, but this is one of those things where, and I mentioned this before we hit the record button, I don't say this to be grim, it's just the reality. If for whatever reason, a grocery store or a food chain or, a CPG poisoned somebody with bad food,
Sure.
somebody tampered with it,
Yeah.
somebody didn't didn't manage the cold chain properly, we got sick people.
Hmm.
And then forevermore, people are going to say, I don't shop at blank because remember that big scandal. And it could be 10 years ago.
Sure.
I no longer buy that product because remember it was recalled however many years ago.
Yeah.
We have very long memories, but they're also vague memories, right?
Right.
It
Right.
might have happened at one store in LA and all of us in the Midwest, like, I've never eaten that again. we
Yeah.
we don't need excuses not to eat our fruits and vegetables.
Right. Right.
So super important. So you and I, before we hit the record button, we kind of identified 5 areas we wanted to talk about. I'll kind of walk through those with you today. So first and foremost, when we're trying to get this, stay compliant to the Food Safety Modernization Act and do the things that you need to do every day, you guys have kind of created your own list of things. And this is what we're kind of going to go through today. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is your processes and protocols. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think we deal with quite a few different perishable shippers, and a lot of them are in the produce industry. And one thing that we're very adamant on is um, the Food Safety Modernization Act and making sure that drivers and carriers are, whether that's sanitary, free of any odor, their equipment's in good shape, they're pre-cooled at the right temperature prior to loading. I think a lot of times you'd be amazed to see how many drivers show up to some of these shippers with holes in their trailer. The air chute is hanging from the ceiling down to the floor. They come in with the reefer off, right? Like it's very it's astounding to see some of these, especially if you don't do
Right.
some of the processes that we have. So
So,
one of the things that we do, that's one thing that we take a lot of pride in is our processes, our protocols. How do we dispatch drivers? The language that we use or the instructions that we have is making sure that drivers have a washout. We get the receipt. Drivers have a clean inside of the trailer, making sure that there's no holes on the doors, no holes inside the trailer. Sometimes these forklift drivers will drive in and they'll notice like the floor of the trailer being wobbly, right? Well, you don't want to load $40,000 or 40,000 pounds of product onto a trailer if the floor is wobbly and it might give, right? That would not
right.
be that would not be a good solution. Um, and then the last thing, making sure that these drivers are showing up pre-cooled, down to temperature prior to loading so that we can get that product out of a chilled warehouse into their trailer without any interruption. Those are some things that we do. We actually, we developed it into more of like a case study, but we have a shipper down in Laredo, Texas, also Laredo and McAllen, and we developed an entire process and employed another company or an inspection station down in that area so that drivers have to stop by, get an inspection. Then once they get their inspection sheet done, and now they're free to go to the shipper and get the pickup number. So that's
Oh,
something, yeah, it's something that, in good faith for our clients that we wanna do. At the same time, we paid for that out of pocket, right? It's not not an easy, pill to swallow. At the same time, we wanna do what's right. We wanna make sure that these drivers are showing up and that product's not being tampered with, or that product's not being loaded into a, dirty, messy, trailer that, might be, 20 degrees above
right.
temp.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at that, what you just described there. You mentioned holes in the vehicle, so in the trailer. Um, I've seen this different times, and, I was moving steel from Mexico.
Mhm.
Well, my customer was moving steel from Mexico, and I remember kinda running into this where it was like, first, it was very humid environment, and all of a sudden to have a hole meant that we weren't doing temperature control, but we basically ended up with steel that was rusted before it could get to, the East Coast of the US. But, they we kept asking, "Make sure those trailers are good," and then when it show up, and then you're in that trick bag of saying, "Are we gonna be late to deliver this
Mhm.
because or am I gonna take a chance with a less than trailer?"
Mhm.
And that's a horrible position to put your customer into. And when we're talking about cooling, if there's a hole, it's hard enough to keep that trailer cool. If there's a hole and you're cooling the 100-degree temperatures in Texas or California or even up here in the Midwest now, uh, you're gonna lose.
Yeah, I think that I mean, when you talk about cold chain integrity and making sure the front of the trailer is just as cold as the back of the trailer, that those are things that, we discuss often. And if you do have a hole inside the trailer, a hole where, or hell, even if the doors don't shut properly, right? And we see that often where it might get damaged from a previous delivery, it might get damaged from a driver, making sure that those doors shut properly where there's no airflow. I mean, you're getting as you drive. I mean, this time of year, it's heavy in California, so we're picking up a ton of shipments out of California, and we're taking them across the U.S. Right, so you go through Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas, and the road at that time, like if that hole's underneath, and that heat from the road is coming. I mean, what is the temperature of that? Right, 100, 110, getting into that trailer, and not to mention, the sanitary. Like when a driver stopped, what kind of um rodent or pest or whatever can get in there during that time, right? So, like, making sure that these trailers are in great condition, making sure that the drivers are doing everything they can as far as maintenance and upkeep on
Yeah.
their equipment.
Yeah. I talked to you the other day when we were talking about this topic about washout, and
Mhm.
I've always when somebody says, "Okay, that trailer has to be clean." Okay, that's somewhat subjective. I think we're gonna end up at some point with a more objective measure. I always talk about like a swab where you go,
Mhm.
"Yep, I took a swab off of the floor in 3 walls, and I put it in a test," and then go, "Yes, this is clean enough." And I'm not saying we don't do a good job. I suspect we do a very good job on this for the most part. But what's the difference if I say, "Yeah, Brian, that got a proper clean out?" You're like, "How so?" "Well, I have a power washer at my house, and I cleaned out my truck."
All right.
Is that good enough? Maybe, I don't know. That's why
Sure.
I say I do know a big trucking company I talked to years ago said, "We have certified, washout facilities for our trucks," and we went and we saw how they were doing it. I was like,
Mhm.
"Alright, makes sense."
Yeah.
But what you guys are doing with separate inspections, that means if for whatever reason that it wasn't already cooled down, you say, then I don't if it's not cooled down, then don't go to my customer yet.
Mhm. No, I
If
think
this isn't clean, don't go to my customer yet. I don't want my customer to be the inspector. We're gonna do it ourselves.
right, and I think that, it's delaying the loading process as well, right? So if you have a 5 p.m. appointment, your driver shows up at 4 p.m., their trailer is not in compliance, it's not in good shape, the reefer's
Right.
off. Well, there's no way that they're gonna get down to temp in that 1 hour, right? So just delaying the loading process, this customer is pushing this product to the edge of the dock, and they're ready to load it. Well, now, that driver's not ready, and he's not gonna be ready for another 2 hours because he has to get his trailer fixed. Well, now they have to move that product out of the way, and you're causing delays and disruptions.
Yep.
I do think that, when we talk about, cold chain integrity, And, a lot of people are unfamiliar with the air chute that goes down on the roof of the trailer inside. It's like a baggy type of material. And what it does is it distributes the cold air from the reefer unit up front all the way throughout the trailer. And we'll see, drivers check in and, like I mentioned earlier, but the air chute will be ripped down and it'll be, part of it will be hitting the ground. And I'm like, all right, how is this gonna, like how is
Right.
this proper? So that's where with the inspection station, we have drivers go in, they take a look, the inspection employees, they will take a look at the trailer, make sure that the air chute is pinned up, all the rivets are in the right spot. Um, and there are and this is what I love is like just from like the safety perspective, there's quite a few shippers in our different regions that are having more and more expectations and standards around this. They won't load a driver who has that type of equipment, which they shouldn't, right? It's just to me, that's where, we need to do a better job as a whole in the industry, making sure that these drivers have the right type of equipment, they have the right type of air chute that's in good working condition.
And so when you think about the food shipper, so let's just say you're shipping produce. The Food Safety Modernization Act was created for more or less for the most vulnerable food. And that's a lot of times produce because it can degrade very quickly. If you don't pre-cool it really
Yeah.
quickly out of the fields, because it's 90 some degrees in the fields, you got to cool it down. The Food Safety Modernization Act says you have a plan, and their plans within their facilities are really locked down.
Hmm.
And then when they move it, they say, I'm moving it with a trucking company that I don't know.
Right.
So they have to, this is probably one of the higher risk, not the riskiest area, but it has risk because you don't know who it is. So the second thing you told me you guys like to focus on is picking the right partners. And I think the reason people are working with you already is because they say they're the right partners. Veritas is the right partner. But on top of that, they're picking the right partners because
Sure.
this is an area where, you know, this is their game, their baby every step of the way until you go, now I'm moving it across country and I'm moving it with strangers, people who don't work for me. That's got to be a scary move. So you have to have the right partner. So talk about what you guys do in terms of selecting the right partners and being the right partner.
Yeah, great question. I think, a lot of folks don't realize this, but, the director of logistics or the director of transportation that's giving us an opportunity to move their shipments, their job's on the line. If we don't perform, if there's a couple claims where the temp comes in hot, well, their job's on the line and they have to report to a COO or a CFO, and they don't want to do that. They want to make sure that the carriers they pick and the carriers that they use are reliable and communicate properly and do the right things. One thing that I'm very proud of is our internal carrier network. So you talk about picking the right partners. Our goal each and every week within our organization is making sure that we're using 70% of our drivers within our internal carrier network. What does that mean? Anytime that there is a shipment that's out there, we are using a carrier or a trucking company that we have used before and has a track record with us. We're trying to get that number up to 80%, but it's hovered around 70 for the past year and a half, 2 years, which means 7 out of 10 drivers or 7 out of 10 loads that we move have a carrier that's already familiar with our processes, our protocols. They know what to do. They know how to do it. And we don't have to go to the load boards or go out to DAT
Right.
and have to, pick a carrier that we've never really worked with before or, might not know anything about.
Yep. And when you say account familiarity, it really counts for quite a bit because your they know your customer. You have a shared customer. So when they say, yeah, there's little things that you learn when working with somebody every week, and you go, yep, I got to get there by 5 p.m. on Wednesdays because Bob leaves to go to golf right after that. So we got to make sure we get there. And you might even have phone numbers at the dock. There's all the little things that you try and communicate as a broker or even a dispatcher, but somehow it you can't capture all the human interaction. So it's really important to have that repeat business. Um, Talk about seals for a minute, because I know
Yeah.
that's an important part of what you guys are doing.
Sure. Yeah. I think, a lot of this gets overlooked sometimes within our space. Some customers are very adamant about it. Other customers are not. And I wish they were. That's something that, there's a couple different items that we get once a driver's loaded. We want to get the paperwork. We were going to get the pallet count, case count, temperature, as well as the seal number. So that is an area that we want to make sure that the seal does not get broken in transit. Um, you know, Anything to jeopardize the integrity of the product, we don't want to have happen. So we get that on confirmation. We get a picture from the driver. We get the seal number. Usually that seal number is printed on the bills from the shipper, and if it's not, we'll have the driver write that seal number with a
Right.
picture on there.
So for people who don't do this every day, what do you mean by a seal on a truck?
Yeah, so anytime it's just like a kind of like a zip tie, right? So you get a zip tie that is, on the back of the truck, making sure that the doors are locked and secured, and then they'll put a seal number on there, or so there on the seal there will be a number. They report that number to us, and at the receiver, that number should match the bill of lading from the shipper. It's
Right.
showing that nobody got into the trailer, nobody opened the doors, nobody jeopardized the product.
Yeah, so if you arrive with a broken seal, they aren't taking that food.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah. And it's interesting if you ever I know somebody was on my podcast a while back, and they said that a guy who very on a regular basis picked up at a location, loaded a truck, and then he had a seal, and he put the seal on his truck. Um, he'd work with these guys on a regular basis, but they weren't present when the seal went on, and they
Sure.
said, "We can't make that work. We have to undo the seal and then audit all the stuff."
Yeah, I mean, we've
And I
had.
was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
man." And they said, you can say trust but verify, but that's not the way this works anymore. It's verified and then trust.
sure. I
I
mean, we've
fully trust you after I verified that you haven't done anything wrong.
right. Not to get too much into storytelling, but we had, this was probably, several years ago now, but we had a load of or a shipment of, raw juice in containers that was going from Connecticut out to California. Driver showed up, no seal. And now they wouldn't take it. Now there's a rejection. They say, "Hey, we're not taking this. We need to make sure that, like, there was a seal put on." We talked to the shipper, driver switched, trailers in the parking lot of his, of his facility, of his secure facility or yard, right? And he had to open it up to see what was inside, right? And it's like, "Oh my gosh," like, that was a full 7 hours of having to figure that out, right? So, time I wish I could get back, but you know what? It's a good experience. It's a diploma on the wall. I learned something that day. So, that is something that, is the seal is very important, especially when you arrive to these retailers and these receivers. They're gonna reject the product. They don't wanna put something on their shelf that's gonna jeopardize their consumer.
I hate to do this to you guys, Tylenol, if they're listening. Years ago, I'm thinking 20 some years ago, some crazy person tampered with Tylenol. Um, I forget what they did, but I don't remember if people died or were just poisoned. Was not anything to do with Tylenol, but somebody opened up some of these containers, put something in, poisoned people. And that's right now why when you open a container of Tylenol or any other medicine, you got to seal and then cotton. It's very difficult because we didn't have that. So it changed their business. Here it is 20 years later, maybe 30 years later. I'm talking about it. People remember those things, and there's not one brand out there that can afford that kind of bad press.
No.
And, as soon as you hear something bad about a company, it just sticks in your mind. So we're not being stupid when we worry about these seals. Anyway, next thing I want to talk to you about is temperature control. So important right now. It's hot, 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 even up here in the Midwest. And it's got to be a lot hotter down in the South and the Southwest. So how do you make sure that the temperature is the right temperature from the time they pick it up to the time they drop it off?
Yeah, I think it's all over our documentation. It's all over the rate confirmations that we send to drivers. When we verbally dispatch the carrier, we tell them a specific temperature. Now they are instructed to set their reefer temp to whatever is on the bill of lading per the law. So anytime that they get this document or they get the bill of lading, they have to set this temperature to whatever's on the bill of lading. Once they get that, throughout transit, we see a lot of our shippers today, they do have recording devices within the trailer. So you will see, and these could be either Tive or Emerson, and I think they just switched names to Copeland or something like that. But this is a device that's within the trailer. It tells the location of the load or the shipment, as well as the temperature inside. So sometimes, these different shippers out there, and I think they cost like $30 or something like that, or $50. Um, and so a lot of times what they do is they tape it on the last pallet. So they will monitor these temperatures throughout transit. And if these temperatures get up to a certain level, then they'll let us know, or they'll request any type of picture, any type of picture of the reefer unit. So those are things that I know with our shippers, they do often. Now, if your shipper is not doing that, or they don't have any type of recording device in place, or they're not doing that at the shipper level, we require for different shipments, we require pictures for drivers or from drivers. What's the reefer temp at? Send me a picture when you're available.
So it's a picture of the temperature?
Yeah, of like the digital display that's on the side of the reefer showing what temperature that they're running it at, right? So that we know, we can see, there are some discrepancies sometimes where, we have a customer now that runs a certain product at like 38 or 40 degrees, right? And on our rate confirmations and on our documentation, it comes over as 38 to 40. Well, drivers, they want to know, they don't want to be held liable for any type of claim. So we always say whatever's on the bill of lading, and usually what's on the bill of lading is 38. So we tell them 38 degrees, here's what it is. Make sure that you're doing what the bill of lading says.
Do the modern reefers, they already have those controls within, so they don't necessarily need an external. So they can tell, and is that number on their ELD, so they can say, "Yep, I'm seeing it on a regular basis," and if it starts to go out of temperature range, they can take action?
Yeah, some of them are integrated. I would say that the majority of them are not. A majority of them are still, you have to get outside of the tractor, go back, punch the
Yep.
number in, and do it manually. We do see there's a couple brands out there where hell, you can even do it remotely. I know we have an asset-based carrier that we deal with that's out of Georgia. And, we get them a lot of backhauls from California to Georgia. They don't let their drivers touch anything on the reefer unit. They do it all remotely from their dispatch office in Georgia.
Yep.
So the driver doesn't have to do anything
Yep.
whenever they, go into a shipper or throughout transit.
So I think the goal is not to find out after the fact that this got out of temperature range. So, in the past, we've had this, 10 years ago, if we were talking about this, we'd be kind of talking about rear view mirror stuff. Like, yeah, turns out this came out of temperature range. So is it okay? Now we're to the point where the expectation is we're going to catch it if it starts to, for whatever reason, malfunction and come out of temperature range. And I think, if you look at the Food Safety Modernization Act, I know you have.
Yeah.
It says that the brokers, the carriers, the shippers are all entitled to ask, give me the information from the time you picked it up to the time you dropped it off. I want that documentation that proves that this stayed within the right temperature. So I think that digital technology is obviously going to catch up, the Internet of Things, whatever you want to call it. But we're still, to your point, not quite there yet.
Yeah, no, I think we're a lot of the shippers that we work with, and everything that I hear in the industry, there is some sort of recording device within the trailer to
Right.
make sure that we're recording whether that's a temp tail or that's
Yep.
any type of device to record the temperature.
Yep. It's important. So, yeah, and I think it's, you mentioned Tive, and I've had them on the podcast a few times. If you look at those sensors that they create, originally it was, tell me where my truck's at. And then they started saying, it's not enough to tell you where the truck is. Tell me the humidity of where you're at. Tell me the temperature of where you're at. Tell me whether this pallet was dropped. So they're providing more and more and more information. And I think the more they give us, the more we want. So I think those tools are here to stay. So the next thing I want to talk to you about, and we talked the other day about this, and you said that the important thing for you guys, we've already talked about your process and protocol and picking the right partners. We just talked about temperature control. To make all that happen, you say you really are focused on your company culture. Please elaborate.
Yeah, I think it's people talk about culture often, and they talk about the ping pong tables and the Papa Shots and free lunch Friday. And to us, like, that's not what it is. What the culture is, it's a way of doing things the right way and making sure that our people are empowered and they have the right type of training to do business the way it's supposed to be. And I think, for us, with these processes, with these protocols, we can essentially service these clients and make sure that we're picking up a load, delivering a shipment, no issues, on time, every single time. Now, does that happen always? No, it doesn't. We run into issues just like anybody else, but making sure that people within our organization know the right way to do things. And we've developed these protocols and these processes over time. Like, were we very good, at these several years ago? Probably not. But I think we've gotten better over time, and we have the experience to know, like, okay, what works, what doesn't. And, understanding that and having that continuous education as we move forward is huge for our business.
Yeah. If you don't have a culture of food safety and FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act compliance, and customer success and, other things, it doesn't happen. You can have the processes, you can have all those things, but if the culture somehow developed where it's like, yeah, Brian and Justin write all that down, but we don't do that. Nobody
Yeah.
chases us on that stuff. Don't worry about it. Then you're not going to be successful, because the culture kind of trumps the best intentions we might have in our businesses. And we've also seen, when you watch, you mentioned sports earlier, when you watch the best football teams, the best baseball teams, obviously it's not teamwork, but there's a culture that develops, and it's one of that's obviously a winning culture. That's what, I guess that's where we get it from. But if you don't get that culture right, and if it's not focused on risk management and food safety and continuous improvement, then it just you're not going to get the right results.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that it starts with our people and making sure. I think that the biggest keyword here is the execution of doing the right thing. I think a lot of people can say it. I do feel like some people cut corners out there. We're like, oh, I'll do it sometimes. But I think
Right.
for us, like, we make sure that we're driving this home, and the execution of it on a daily basis is something that we're very, very passionate about. Because, I mean, hell, if we're not, we're going to see it at the shipper around 4 o'clock when our driver shows up and he gets rejected, right? So we got to, it's a, it's a daily reminder to make sure that we're doing these processes and protocols, and not cut those corners.
Well, it's you mentioned the cutting the corners. Right now, this is a tough time for brokers, tough
Yeah,
time for carriers, tough
sure.
time for not so much for the shippers. They're like, hey, this isn't all bad, but it's a tough time for those companies. And so everyone's saying we got to do more with less. People start to cut corners. And I think there's certain things that we cut corners, and then at some point someone goes, why do we even do that? That doesn't make sense. But when it comes to food safety and FSMA compliance, your customers are held to a higher standard, and they hold you to a higher standard. And if you don't develop the culture that allows you to support that, then it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think there's, as if you are shipping, fresh food and beverage products, you do have a higher standard just because it is a little bit trickier of a ball game when you're shipping fresh food at a specific temperature across the country, making sure that it's seals intact and everything in between. So I agree with you. It's definitely a more challenging space, but that's where we have our experience and where we feel like we excel at.
So the last thing I want to talk to you about is, I know you guys do a lot of training in the Food Safety Modernization Act, and which is food safety and cold chain. Talk about that.
Yeah, so that's something that we do. We have a couple of account managers and sales directors currently that are continuously training their group and making sure that these individuals that are within these teams are doing the right thing. I think for us, we also take a lot of pride in doing, we call them SME training, so subject matter expert trainings. And that might be, this month it might be on a certain topic, next month it might be on a different topic. But those are things that we want to make sure that we're keeping everybody within our organization ahead of the game or ahead of the curve when it comes to our industry and what's ahead and how to handle certain situations. So I think, for us, we are passionate about training. It's one of the things that I love about the job. There's a lot of other things that I don't love, but those are some of the things that we really, truly enjoy. And, if we can empower our people and train our people the best way, they're only going to be that much better for our clients.
I know you mentioned when we started that you were a baseball player, and when you think about where you came from, and this applies to anybody who played at a high level of sports, the fundamentals and the foundation is always training and is always kind of like, we're going to do this a million times. And what's interesting, I remember I have 2 daughters, and I remember one time one of them was playing tennis, and she said, I don't want to just do this practice all the time. I want to do something more. Cause it was like, 100 forehand, 100 backhand. And I was like, you know what? This is what Serena's doing right now. She's not doing some advanced work. I'm sure she is doing that also,
Yeah.
but she's doing the fundamentals. And if you ever hear like Steph Curry, how many shots he has taken in practice over the last 20 years, it's crazy. And that's why when it's game time, he's able to make it happen. And it's automatic. Oh, pretty close to automatic.
Yeah. I mean, you always hear, even stories, any superstar that's out there, like the Kobe Bryants of the world, the Steph Currys of the world, what are they doing, when no one's watching, right? And how does that prepare them? So, yeah, hopefully, I don't think we're on that level, right? We're not definitely not on that level as far as the, superstars of the world, but hopefully we can, give our folks some training and some tips and strategies to, handle these types of situations.
So I'm talking to my friend Brian Hastings. We're talking about From Farm to Fork, a broker's guide to food safety and cold chain logistics. Kind of a mouthful. And I'm going to talk about the 5 areas we talked about today that ensures we get that food safety. Is first and foremost, you have to have the processes and the protocols. That means we're doing everything we need to do to ensure sanitary transportation. When you look at the Food Safety Modernization Act, the part that falls to us is sanitary transportation. And if you want to be FSMA compliant, you need that sanitary transportation. That means you get the washout, the temperature control, make sure that equipment is exactly what it's supposed to be. You're not allowed to have any holes in the truck. You're not allowed to have it dirty. It can't put that food at risk. And by the way, if you decide I'll show up with a kind of clean trailer, the company is going to send you away and most likely fine you. So next, we talked about picking the right partners. You just talked about the importance of using your internal carrier network. You're not necessarily going and looking for brand new partners. You want guys who've been there, done that for you in the past, who you can trust. That also means that I can trust them to get the seals right and get the ongoing temperature control right, which was the third point we talked about. Temperature control is everything from start to finish, and you just have to make sure that you get those inspections in, make sure that's a truck that can keep the temperature control from beginning to end. And also, monitoring and visibility has become super important with that. It used to be, yep, it's good enough. Picked it up. The temperature's right. When I dropped it off, the temperature's right. Nope, not good enough anymore. Now we want ongoing from start to finish. We need to know what that temperature control is. Then we talked about the right culture. You guys have developed a culture within your company that is all about Food Safety Modernization Act compliance, customer success. Any good operator is worried about risk, and that's risk to the food, risk to time, risk to money, risk. And you guys your job is to de-risk. And obviously that involves a lot of customer or continuous improvement. Last but not least, you guys do a lot of training in food safety, cold chain, all the things we've talked about today. Brian Hastings, put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, so at Veritas, we're on a mission to be the best service provider possible in the United States of America. I think for us, it matters to our clients and to our people that we built a culture that is built around the processes, the protocols, what we can do to overservice our clients and help them get product delivered from A to B.
I love it. I love it. So what conferences will we see you and the fine folks from Veritas at in this year?
Yeah, so there's a couple conferences towards the end of the year. I know the IFPA show in Anaheim will be attending. That's mid-October. And then we haven't finalized details around it yet, but the Food Shippers event in early March will also be in attendance there.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to some conferences too. I will be at the IANA. That's Intermodal Association of North America. They're out at Long Beach this year. I'm going to be doing some interviews out there. I'm also going to Trimble Conference down in New Orleans.
All right.
I'm going to the Broker Carrier Summit. Where's that? Down in Orlando. And I'm missing one. CSCMP Edge. Don't want to miss that one. So there's lots of conferences. I'll tell you, there's too many conferences, and they're all good. It's funny when you go to a conference, you always go, I'm not going to miss this. This one's great. It's like somewhere like the family reunion, and then you go next year. God, I can't go to them all.
It's tough. You got to pick and choose.
So what I'll do, Brian, I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile. I'll put a link to your website. Any of the links you and your marketing team give me, I'll put those in the show notes. And thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate having me on the show.